will call your attention to the Open Meetings Act posted here in the council chambers. If you'd please now join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Rehnquist.
Here.
Lange.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Dahlkeller.
Here.
Mirren.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Faust.
Here.
File.
Here.
Okay, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay. I would look for a motion to approve the full agenda.
So move.
Second. Okay. No discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay, that moves us into our regular agenda. Before we begin with public hearings and related action, since we do have an appointment of a city physician on the agenda, we are going to move that item to the front of the pack. So item number 22 will be taken up, and I would look for a motion to consider resolution number 2018-34, approving the mayor's appointment of Danielle Myers-Noli as city attorney.
I'll make the motion, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. I will kick this off with a little background here. And Danny, I apologize. I've left the details of your bio at my office, so I'm gonna go from memory here. But this process comes at the end of a year-long series of decision-making on restructuring and staff transitioning plans. About this time a year ago, we set plans in place to transition to new city attorney to succeed Clint Shukai, who gave 25 years of committed service to the city of Norfolk. We began a national search of candidates, and a series of interviews were conducted by myself and representatives of the city council and the city administrator. And ultimately, we decided to select Danielle Noel Myers as our new city attorney. And I'll say a little bit about Danny. She is a native of the area. She graduated from Norfolk High School. She then went to Kansas City and got her undergraduate degree from Rockhurst University in political science. She's a graduate of the University of Nebraska Law School. After law school, she went to New York City and did some corporate strategy planning work there for about a year. She then returned home to Nebraska and worked for Hall County, where she was a deputy county attorney in Hall County for 2 years. Then she was called to return home. She wanted to return back to her native Norfolk, and she did so and worked for about a year in private practice here in Norfolk. It was a few months ago that we hired Danny on to help begin the process of this transition, and she's familiarized herself with the city staff and city operations, and has helped prepare for a smooth transition into the office. So with that, I will open up to any discussion among the council prior to their decision on this, or questions or comments. So, seeing none, I would then ask for the council's vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Resolution 2018-34 is adopted.
Okay, so Danny, we will have you officially take your seat, please. Welcome aboard. There's no turning back now. It's official. All right. That moves us back in our agenda to the public hearings and related actions section, item number 20. I will open this public hearing at the request of Daniel and Connie Geary to consider a zoning change from R1 single-family residential district to R3 multiple family residential district on property generally located a quarter-mile north of the intersection of South Victory Road and East Omaha Avenue. And to begin the discussion, Val, would you give us some background, please?
Yes, thank you. Beth, if you could unblank the screen. This is a piece of property that, like you said, is zoned correctly, currently R1, and the request is to R3 multifamily. This is the piece of property that at last city council meeting, it was annexed into the city, so it is officially inside city limits right now. So it's this area right here that has single family inside city limits to the west and then commercial inside city limits to the south. We did have discussion at this planning commission, and I see some of the neighbors came back out because it is a public hearing tonight also, and so I'm sure you'll hear what was said at planning commission also. If you have any questions for me on history or anything, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Any questions for Val before we get started? Okay, this is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment on this matter can do so at this time.
My name is Tom Hoyle, and I'm a property owner in the Werner subdivision, directly adjacent to the property being discussed. I do have a couple of things that I would like clarified. The DP management, does that Dial Properties?
Yes.
It is, okay. And we know that the Dial Properties are the same company that owns the Sunset Plaza. We've seen the deterioration of that property. Our concern is, this is rental property. Renters and tenants alike don't always take care of property. This is a big concern for us. We have a nice neighborhood. Granted, there are a couple of properties in our neighborhood that aren't the nicest, but it is an issue. There's going to be more traffic. The road already is probably in need of at least re-asphalt coating. If you run a bunch more traffic on there, it's going to be a problem. Our biggest issue is the water and sewer development. It's being pushed upon us. It's not something that we want, not something that anybody in the neighborhood wants. The city seems determined to push this on us. And so basically, one of the assistant engineers came around with us a letter and said, don't shoot the messenger, but this is going to probably cost you in the neighborhood of $25,000. So suck in a little air with that. Now, if you look around the room, look at all the neighbors, look at all the gray hair. There's a lot of people that are either retired, close to retiring, a couple widows in the neighborhood. Nobody has substantial income in the neighborhood. This is a lot to drop on us. So I don't know how you would feel if that were dumped on you, or maybe elderly parents or something. I think this is an issue. I think if you're going to force this on us, I think we need to do something to mitigate these costs a little more. I know the city said they were going to pay part of it. We haven't seen anything as far as numbers. What's the rental property going to, what's their share of this going to be? We understand that it's going to be extended so that the UCAR Development Corporation also wants to hook onto this. What's their share going to be? Is it fair to us? There's going to be 160 units in this apartment complex. Are they paying their fair share? Or, because they're already getting tax increment financing. So they're already getting a break on that. We're not getting a break on our property taxes. That's a big load. I ask people that are retirement age or close to retirement age to go out and borrow $20,000, $30,000. They said $25,000, but that's not to run it to our house. And we're gonna have to pay that cost too. And so I think it's a substantial issue to that Yeah, I think it needs to be discussed before we move this on, because once that's changed to R3, it's open to develop, and that's gonna be forced on us. I personally don't think it's fair. These people don't either, otherwise they wouldn't be here. So, any comments?
Thank you, Tom. We're gonna go through the process of letting anyone speak who wishes to at this time, and then we'll try to address questions that come up as best as we can.
My name's Marty Pfluger. I live at 1100 East Bluff, same Werner development over there. And yeah, I would like to just reiterate what my neighbor Tom said. It is just a really substantial cost that's going to be quite a burden on us. And I know that Mr. Gary, it was never his intention to impose any kind of a financial burden on us, but I'm not sure if maybe he didn't know quite how this was going to work. But I think he did. I know you guys are all for, I've been hearing a lot of in the news about how we need more housing. I do have a question. How many vacant properties are there right now in Norfolk? Can anybody tell me that?
Do we have an estimate on that number at this point?
I mean, I just know that everybody wants more. And one thing I've wondered is, I know Norfolk has a lot of rental properties now. Some of them I wouldn't want to live in. They are not. And I don't know whose job it is to, if there's any way that you impose upon the owners of these properties that they need to do a better job of keeping them up. A coat of paint on the outside doesn't do a whole lot for some of these. And I'm not saying this one is gonna be that way. Don't know, only time will tell, but I'm not really wanting to be the one that has to suffer the consequences. I just really put it to you guys to really deeply consider this. I mean, there's a lot of other places that could be developed. I mean, we've been there, well, probably, I don't know, I suppose some of the places have been there 30 years. And everybody's gotten along fine up to this point. And even if any of us did have an issue with our well or our septic, the lay of the land is such that it would easily accommodate any repairs we'd have to make. So it's not like we really need this. I just, we feel like we're getting kind of sucked up in somebody else's endeavor, and we're just not really jazzed about having to finance it. So, thank you.
Mr. Pfluger, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How long has your property been a part of the city of Norfolk?
As long as I've lived there.
For over 30 years then?
As far as I knew, that Victory Road was always the city limit line there. And all the years I've paid property taxes, I guess I haven't, can't say anything really stands out in my mind of any great, you know, anything that the city's really done that stood out, other than have a couple of their snow trucks back into my yard and tear it up when they came through. what,
The reason I was asking is because one of the things that occurs with annexations and stuff like that is that the city's supposed to be proposing and getting installed utilities. You aren't supposed to have wells and private septic systems inside the city limits.
Can I add something to that?
So,
We're gonna have to do this in order. If you want a chance to speak again, you'll have to come to the podium.
well, okay, that I'm not aware of. Like I say, I'm just a homeowner
yeah.
and trying to chisel out my own little slice of heaven out there, you know? It's just on the other side of the flood control. Nobody really bothered us until now. But I don't know.
but my point was, you have been part of the city for over 30 years.
Yes, and I pay taxes, and I assume now, once this, this development goes in, and when we're on city water and sewer, that will raise the assessment of the value of our property, right?
And that comes from Madison.
That comes from Madison.
That does not come from the city of Norfolk.
Nothing to, okay, so I need to go down there and talk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But,
Let me tell you, just for Steve.
I guess, really, what's the return on this for us? It's a big investment, and I'm just trying to find the silver lining here.
That was my only question, was how long you were part of the city.
All right.
Any other questions for Marty?
Oh,
Hey, no. Thank you, Marty. Not at this.
I can-
I can.
I can answer your question, but you're not gonna like it.
Okay.
You asked what the silver lining was. It's the bad thing you said, your property taxes go up, which means you're gonna pay more taxes, but your property is worth more. You know, and you won't receive that until you sell it, you know.
Until I move, which,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
wasn't really something.
Yeah, if you hook up to city water and sewer, it's more attractive, but that's a long ways down the road, so you may not see it.
Exactly my point.
Yep, sorry.
All right. Nope, that's okay. All right. Anything else? Anything? No. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Anyone else who wishes to make comment?
My name's Sean Langmeyer. I live at 802 Channel Road, property just directly north. Actually, my property would border it. Just a couple of numbers. Mr. Vickery told me that these apartments, that I didn't have anything to worry about because these apartments were gonna be higher end, $1,300 a month units. $1,300 a month, 160 units, that's $208,000 a month. 12 months a year, that's $2,490,000. That's going from the city of Norfolk to a property or investment company in Omaha. That being said, if it's $25,000 to hook up as a single-family dwelling, shouldn't each of these apartments be considered a single-family dwelling? $25,000, hook up, 160 units, that's $4 million that they should be contributing to this city water and sewer. They're all saying that this is gonna raise our property value by putting in the city water and sewer. Okay, what is the property value gonna happen, or what's gonna happen to my property value with an apartment complex next to me? That's 300 to 400 people living in a pretty confined area. Mr. Lange, sorry, you did work for Hesby. Do your employees, can they afford $1,300 a month apartments?
I do not know what they can or can't afford.
So I mean, I'm not saying they can or can't, I'm just saying there are that many jobs in the city of Norfolk that pay that kind of a wage. At $1,300 a month, that buys a pretty nice house. So,
Thank you, Sean. Anyone else wishing? Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Cindy Vitana Sunbeck. I live at 900 Warner Drive, and I live right in Warner's Addition. To answer your question about being in outside city limits and inside city limits, we bought our house or land 40 years ago, and it was outside city limits. In the process of that time, we were annexed into the city limits. We had to buy our own wells, put our water in, abide by all the city codes and all this. Now we're forced to pay for water and sewer, and we're all starting to get to the retirement age that we would like to have, thinking we were comfortable, and now we're forced in paying an outrageous amount for water and sewer. I don't know if you're aware of it, but up to about 3 weeks ago, our rural mail carrier was still delivering mail to rural for us for rural area until 3 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden we have a Norfolk Public mail route. So we were kind of classified as rural, but now we're classified inside, but we knew we were inside. So to me, it's just like it's a financial burden for you to put on us as a homeowner, and and I just take this lightly because Mrs. Warner was the one that developed this area, and she wanted single family people in this area, and she would roll over if she found out that was going to for apartments, because this is what her land she wanted, and now it's going to be apartments, but she wanted family only in there. So, you know, for us to have water and sewer, we have that, we paid for it, and now you're forcing us to pay another additional cost on us. And to see an apartment get away with getting income after income, and for us to make up that financial burden, it's gonna take us 20 years, and after 20 years, we won't be here. We won't get any benefits out of it. So it's a financial burden on us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so now.
I'm Tracy Rutenberg. I live at 703 South Victory Road, and I have a comment for you, Mr. Lang, about city limits. You said anybody in city limits has to hook up the water? Or?
No, I cannot put a well in to personally feed my house. I live inside the
If you're out of
city.
city limits?
I live inside the city.
If you live outside of city limits, do you have to hook up to city water?
I did not say that.
You said something about city limits.
If you live inside the city
I
limits,
don't live in city limits. I live in the corner up from the triangle. I don't live in city limits. My front yard street is the city limit line. I don't live in city limits. So would I have to hook up to city water?
I believe now you do live inside the city limits.
No, I do not. Not as of Madison County. I've already contacted the courthouse.
Did we not annex the property?
In.
Wasn't the
So
annex?
the annexation that was, went through would be for this area here that Josh Victory will be, or DP Properties is developing. The small triangle to the north of that is not in city limits. We will have water within 300 feet of there. And again, we have not, this is very, we haven't even started the engineering per se on this. We've just done some preliminary planning on this, but it would make sense if landowners are open to connecting, that we do that as a function.
Open, you said open
Right.
to?
We haven't had that conversation yet, okay? We'll be visiting with you when the time comes, and you'll have that choice.
That's,
You said open to.
Since you are not in the city limits in that triangle, you would not necessarily be required to connect.
Okay.
We would have water within 300 feet of, it's in city code,
Okay, so,
in writing. But does that help, Jim?
well, yeah, I guess that, I thought that we were annexing the entire situation there.
We
So I guess
not
I,
annex that triangle. You know,
Okay.
as we look at bringing water down into here and providing water to this to the portion on the east-west side of Victory Road that is in city limits, as
Right.
well as providing service to the DP development, that triangle could be served. But again, we would have to have that conversation with those owners. I realize that, but we're quite a ways from being able to have that conversation at this time.
that's my question. Open.
And again, as we grow as a community and we look at other development going on up in that area, I would say it will not be very long before they are circled and enclosed in by city limits.
okay.
That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make comment?
I am Ray DeHale. I live at 700 Channel Road. I am within that triangle out there. One thing that nobody has, I guess, brought to your attention yet, and some of you, I know weren't around back then, but 15 years ago, this was brought up to this group of property owners. We're going to put water and sewer out there. We had some numbers then. My property alone, I remember, $42,000. I would say the city's done a slightly better job this time of getting the price down. But I guess what I would ask this council to do is suspend the change of this property until we have those talks. Let's get some engineering done. So everybody knows what this is going to cost them out in their neighborhoods. The houses out there I can speak of in my neighborhood, the sewer lines all run different directions. The water runs different directions out there. I mean, the way it looks to me, some of these people could have several hundred feet of their own sewer line to get over to that. And that would be good to know ahead of time. You know, it's a lot of money. Like I said, I'm probably one of the younger ones that live out in that neighborhood out there, but you know, it's still a lot of money for all of us. As you know, taxes keep going up. I understand. I know where that comes from. I deal with the county boards quite often with the job title I have, but I definitely think and I will say, there's several of the places in Norfolk got utilities to it. You guys have gave permits for those. Those I think should move forward. But I think this, seeing as how there's such an issue with utilities, there's such an issue with, you know, getting things out there, I really, truly would ask that you guys suspend changing this. You know, it's R1 now. I mean, you guys want to build some house out there, we don't have a problem with that at all. But until there's further engineering done, until the city can give us a lot better idea on what it's going to cost us and what's involved in this and where it's going to be. 15 years ago, I kind of felt like we're in the same place we were today, is that, you know, I had a lot of those comments where, well, we don't know yet. One of the neighbors told me when they talked to the gentleman to come out that day, says, we don't know what it's going to cost. We won't know until the job's finished. I've been around this long enough to know that any job for the city or state of Nebraska County is bid ahead of time. A contractor comes in and bids this job. So this, us not knowing until it's over with, that is a, you know, a blatant lie. Let's just be honest with one another as far as that goes. So that's my comment. Like I said, please, I would hope that you look at this and at least suspend this until we can get some more, till some of the folks here in the city can do their jobs and you know, at least give us some idea, you know, where it's gonna run, how it's gonna affect all of us, so on and so forth. So, thank you. Any questions or comments?
Rick, right?
Randy.
Randy, I'm sorry. Randy, have you at this point had the chance to engage in conversation with anyone from the city about cost estimates on this?
They come out on a Friday afternoon to put a notice on my door.
Okay.
So no, I have not.
Okay.
Do you, I guess as a council, do you feel that we should, as property owners, should have the right to kind of know some of these things? Or we just throw things out there and whatever it is, it is? You know, I think we have some rights as property owners.
Sure.
And-
Part of this process, obviously, clearly.
And, you know, I guess that's what, you know, we're asking for due process and sure would like to know a lot more. I mean, right now, nobody's seen any drawings, nobody's seen any actual figures. I mean, this is a huge investment. I mean, the 24,000, that's about a third of what I gave for my property 20 years ago when I moved in. I do like that area. Do like the city of Norfolk. I mean, you know, we definitely like to see it grow. But you know, I do think that, you know, for our area out there, I think we should actually look at that. I know there's, you know, been a need for apartments here in Norfolk. There's been a lot of discussion about that. But let's also not get in the situation here with some of the bigger cities we got into where we build and we build and we build, and all of a sudden there's nobody here to fill. It's another comment I would have, because then things start going, you know, awry, and, you know, people not living in places, stuff like that. I mean, maybe we need to take a step back and kind of see how many are being built today, how many houses are being built today. You know, do we have people to fill these? I mean, it's not good for anybody if we have properties that are vacant, you know, within the city. You know, it's not good for anybody, you know, as far as that goes. So, just comments, I guess, from my point. So, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Randy.
Evening. My name's Bob Kerblau. I own a construction company and I do remodel work. And it seems to me that when I go into a project of an existing property and things need to be upgraded to existing codes and present codes and stuff like that, that cost bears back onto the project owner. And this is kind of a bad simulation, but this looks like a big remodel project coming into existing property and upgrading and bringing in new water and sewer. And I guess I kind of feel like we should go back to the project owner or developer. Another question I have is, there has been some sewer problems with that lift station out there in the past. I haven't been to the earlier meetings here, so I'm kind of in the black as far as which way the sewer and stuff is going to run. And if it does go to that lift station, is it going to be able to handle it, or should that be upgraded first in order to handle the additional load that it will tend to have? Another thing I had, rumor had it was that they were bringing water and sewer in, but all you had to do is hook up to the water now and sewer once your existing system failed. What would the rates be? Are they going to be the same as everybody else across the board? Because I know you don't gauge your sewer water, you gauge your water usage. So if we're using your water, we're getting charged for putting your water in our waste. So, you know, is there an adjustment there? So, I guess those are the few things that I can think of right now. I thank you for your time.
some of the specific questions about infrastructure capacity. Let's address those before we move on. Steve, can you talk a little bit about the concern about the lift station capacity in the area?
Yeah, the answer is yes. That lift station has capacity to handle this development down here. There is, we have long-term plans of upsizing the lift station that this ultimately feeds to. I believe is on the east side of 35 and a little bit north of this project. There will come a point down the road where that starts to reach capacity, and we will have to upgrade that system. But I would have to say that's probably, I'm going to look over here to Dennis at top. I'm going to say that's probably about a decade out, just kind of based on the growth that we're seeing in that area right now. So again, capacity is for this development, and some additional development over here is adequate. If I may, to go down and answer a few of these other questions that have kind of come up. So, as a function of these projects, we do preliminary engineering for these in-house. And we have laid out an approximate water route and an approximate sewer route so that we can understand the quantities that it would be, that we'd have to put in the ground to get there. Linear feet of storms or sanitary sewer and linear feet of water, number of hydrants, other fixed features that would have to go into the system. And so we've laid that out to the point that we can put together an engineer's estimate and understand what that cost is. And we're pretty comfortable that we have established that cost within a reasonable contingency. At this stage, we use about 20% for contingency on a plan. Based on that, we've, and this is a good opportunity to put in water and sewer and serve a section of the community that's been within city limits for 30 years. My understanding is that previous city engineer, public works director had conversation with residents in that area. I don't know the approximate time, but I'm going to guess about a decade ago. And at that time, I think the number that was floated to the residents was around $40,000 for water and sewer. That was probably a reasonable estimate at the time. We're, as a function of this project, we are subsidizing the existing residential side of the project with about a 1/3 subsidy to the project. The developer is paying his full share to the project, so we're not going to subsidize the development with city funds. So I believe, we've done our due diligence from a city perspective to establish what that cost, what that real cost is going to be. We have shared that with most of the landowners out there. There are probably a couple that we haven't had verbal contact with, but we've made phone calls, and we did go out and knock on doors and hang letters indicating that we wanted to be in contact with them. At this stage, it would be prudent that we not move forward with hard engineering until we get a little bit further down the road with the developer. We want to be sure that he's got his zoning change that he would need before we engage in hard engineering with an engineering company and spend more city resources to refine that cost estimate a little bit. What we've proposed to the homeowners is that we would, we're looking at about $25,000, about $12,500 per utility. We're proposing to put the water in up front and assess that over, I believe, 15 years would be the assessment on that. We might be able to go a little bit further than that. In the meantime, they stay on their septic system. Whenever their septic system fails, they're going to have to replace that anyway. And so when that time would come, rather than put the dollars into replacing their septic system, they would connect to the city sewer system. So, if you take that cost of your septic system replacement and set that aside, the additional cost that we're really talking about is the cost for the water assessment. Like the one individual mentioned, there is still a cost to the homeowner for the plumber to come and connect them to our services. And, you know, they do sit on larger lots out there. They're an acre, acre plus. And so unlike an in-town residence that's on a lot of 100 by 125, it's probably going to be a little bit more to get them connected because it's going to be more quantity of sewer service going in the ground. I guess I hope I've answered some of the questions that have come up, and I certainly take any questions you might have.
So Steve, on the sewer part of it, there's no requirement for immediate connection.
There would be no requirement for immediate connection. It would be only when their system failed that they would be required to connect.
So the two are 12.5 separate.
Right, and again, that's just an average. Some of those, it could be more, a little bit more, a little bit less, but we're targeting that kind of as the average. And again, once the project is designed and bid, you know, yeah, we'll know the real hard number at that time, minus any change orders during the construction stage. And at that time, we would kind of refine those numbers and be visiting with the landowners as well. When we bring that back to the council would have the opportunity to assess that traditionally per the linear foot, or we can look at the cost benefit to the properties. The 25,000 I have shared is what I would probably consider to be the average cost benefit versus a linear foot charge. To look at linear foot, some are going to be 20–30% more, some might be 20–30% less. So we'll have to address how we want to do that assessment.
Steve, did I hear you say that the city basically would subsidize a third of the sewer cost to the homeowners, but no subsidies to the developer?
Correct. Right now, our total estimate for these is about $900,000 apiece, and the city would be putting in about $300,000 apiece.
All right. Thank you.
Would it be an issue where when they hook up to the water, they pay the 12.5 for the water, and when they finally hook up to the sewer, or is it 25 up front and then hook up a few later?
So we would assess the water would be set up as an assessment district, and the sewer would be set up as a connection district. So you would be assessed for the water starting right away, and when you would actually connect to the sewer in the future, that's when that would trigger that.
25,
and
that 12.5.
That 12.5.
So basically, right away, they would be assessed the 12.5, not 25.
Correct. It'd just be assessed for the water
Is that paid
portion.
over time, or is that?
The water assessment would be paid over time, again, about 15 years. The sewer, it would be a lump sum fee whenever that situation occurred. Just like if their septic failed, it's going to be a lump sum fee to get a new sewer system built.
So it'd be
So,
$800 some a year for 15 years.
correct.
Steve, maybe we can talk about the history of this kind of infrastructure finance. We've talked about 10–15 years ago, this idea, or this conversation happened, and there were estimates thrown around of 40 to 45,000 assessment. Well, that's 10 years ago. Is it fair to say we've somewhat altered how we go about the finance of some of these projects, and in this instance anyway, the city is sharing more of the cost, which is why.
That's correct.
With inflation and everything, that number hasn't gone up, it's gone down, because the way this would be framed up is different than how we've done it in the past.
And I would imagine our utilities are now closer than what they were at that time as well. Again, I would, you know, to the extent that we've got a portion of our community that's been within the city for 30 years or better and not had city water and sewer service, this is the right time to provide that the ability to connect. With the development going in over there, it's, you know, we're able to bring those utilities down at a less cost should we want to bring those down there without that development taking place.
Yeah, we're still in public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so.
asked for it? You're saying it's a great opportunity to do this. Has any of these guys asked for it?
When you were brought into the city limits 30 years ago?
Sir, can you state your name, please, for us?
It's Gary Wisniewski, live at 808 Warner.
Okay, thank you.
You know,
I mean,
it should have happened, it should have happened 30 years ago, right. It was asked for 30 years ago when you were annexed in. I don't know the history behind all that, but when property is annexed into the city, it's time to be on city water and city sewer. That's part of being within city limits.
So why did you annex us?
Can't answer that. I mean, that was
30 years ago.
That was 30 years
Yeah,
ago.
30 years ago.
40
But
years.
why annex it if you're not gonna provide the services there? And now it's all of a sudden a great opportunity for us to pay more money.
Well, it's a fair, it is a fair question as to why it wasn't done 25, 30 years ago when you came into the city. You really don't get a vote at that time. It's a requirement by the city to bring those utility services to your neighborhood if you're annexed into the city.
Okay.
But it's a great question, and I can't tell you the answer why it wasn't
I
done.
have another great question. Dave, I think it was you that said it's gonna bring up our property values. Help me understand how.
Well,
I bought my house 10 years ago.
I'm just indicating that if you own a house somewhere and somebody's looking at it to buy it, and they go, what do you got for water and sewer? And you go, well, I got a well out here, and I got a sewer, a cesspool, whatever, you know, septic tank. Or you say, I'm hooked up to city water and sewer, you know that they're more interested in no problems, no well, no nothing.
When any of us bought these property out there, did that influence our decision on buying it?
No. We were glad we were.
Okay, we've got to do this, hey, we've got to do this one at a time, all right? If you have something to say, you'll have the opportunity to say it, but you got to come to the podium.
That's the main thing I meant by the comment. It is attractive. Yeah, you got a whole group of people that didn't have that opportunity. You had wells, so you bought the house the way it is. But if you had a house side by side, a lot of people would take the sewer and the water from the city because you know that you're not gonna have any problems down the road. And if you do, the city takes care of them. That's the comment I meant.
Or I buy the property with the well and the septic system, and I take care of the problem.
That's right, you take care of it.
And
But
that's
it's
the
gonna be
decision
more
all of us have
expensive
made
if
to
your
do that.
sewer goes down the sewer, if you must. It's gonna cost you a lot more than if we break it and then we fix it.
Not according to you guys.
Well, what do you mean?
It's 12,500.
This is new coming in. If you were hooked up to it, I
I
said.
don't need it.
If you had it, if you had it,
Okay.
you have it.
All right, so I'm not an eloquent speaker and all that, but I will point out that there's a ton of people here that have brought up some really good points against. I haven't heard a whole lot for. And I think anytime you do a group of people and you get 100% against, because I don't think there's anybody that lives in the property that's for this, I think that speaks volumes. The fact that we're all here on a Monday night, sitting in this, speaks volumes. You know, it's not just, you know, we're saying something. And 100% of the people are saying something. And I think that's got to weigh into your guys' decision of what you guys do and how you guys look at this. You know, this isn't, you know, half of us are for it, half of us are against. There's not any points being made there. It's, we're not for it. We don't want the buildings there. We don't want that increased traffic. I agree with Tom's assessment about the mall. You know, it's kind of a half-run property, and if that's going to do the same thing, what are we bringing out there? $1,300 rent? Horse crap. I don't know how you're going to fill up 160 units with $1,300. There isn't that much income in Norfolk to make that happen, at least that I'm not aware of. That seems pretty amazing to me. Again, I'm not as an eloquent speaker as I should be or could be, but I think, you know, the fact that there's this many people here, that many people is against it, it's got to be something that's got to be listened to and heard.
All right, thank you, Gary. Any questions for Gary? Is it public hearing? Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so.
Okay, Leroy Utek, I'm in 816 Warner Drive. I'm one of the, I think the fourth house out there. In fact, when I bought that land, there was no street there even. And I think it was 2 or 3 years that I was there before they annexed it into the city. And when they did annex it, I says, why did you annex it? And he said, well, we were just squaring up boundaries. If we'd have known what it would have cost us to do that, we'd have never done it. That's the comment Councilman told me. I don't remember what his name was. But, and I don't know, any of you would be interesting if somebody walked up to your door and says, I want $25,000. Would that bother you? It does bother me. In fact, there's 5 of us out there are living on Social Security. And one has sold, they haven't got their house sold yet, but they just moved out. They moved to Missouri because taxes are cheaper in Missouri. And with them, there's still 4 of us there on retirement. I'm living strictly on Social Security. And there is no way in 10, 15 years that I can pay $25,000. I would have to sell. I would have no choice. So I just think, and to me, I don't think we need another apartments out there. You've okayed apartments all over town. What you gonna fill them with? People? There's not that many people here in town, even if you get more in. So I'd like to see that stay R1 as single family dwelling. I would hate to see, because when apartments go up in there, our value of our land's gonna go down, not up. That's a comment that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Utek. Anyone else?
Josh Vickery, I'm with DP Management out of Omaha. I feel like the villain here. Let me just explain this process of how we decided to come to the city of Norfolk. One is we really like Norfolk as a city that's growing. The businesses are growing, and we've done business here for a long time. Our company, I do represent DP Management, and my company does own the mall, but this is a different ownership group within the company. So we wanted to be separated from on that. It'll be a different ownership name. I'd like to address, I guess, the fact that the water and sewer is going to cost so much. The city has plans to, they told us they had plans to bring water and sewer down. That was always the case, one, because they were annexed in. But we weren't standing there going, hey, we aren't going to do this development without that. We could bring it to our site, and we had an estimate ran for that as well. The city wants to move down that line. So we could actually do this project without any help from the residents or having the residents tap in. So.
Josh, can you expand on that? You were talking about the different ownership groups within Dial Properties.
Yeah,
you have residential, or you have in commercial.
Yeah, we have a retirement community arm. We have Dicon, they're a construction arm. We have the management arm. We have a leasing arm, and then there's owners throughout that group. And I kind of help represent different ownership within the company. It's a very large company, but this is different owners.
So,
different management decisions.
Yep.
Relative to what's going on out at the mall.
Yeah, and our management on the multifamily side is completely separate from retail.
Josh, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying the this portion of the company is still committed to this project, and it's a R3 project, multifamily.
Right.
But you are willing to have a discussion about alternative infrastructure finance mechanisms to do this.
Well, what I was saying is that when we made this decision, we knew where water and sewer was, and we had an estimate of how much it was to bring to our property. And we were willing to, I mean, obviously, we said we'd pay the, you know, that we're paying full freight on that. And in regards to the apartment cost or the rent, we've done extensive studies on the market. We've owned and managed apartments throughout the Midwest for 50 years. So we wouldn't be coming and trying to do this if we didn't know it was going to work.
Josh, just one question for you, and it's more dealing with your experience in that, you know, because what I see being the big benefit for this is the road that's on the east side that goes on by that handles the majority of the majority of the traffic. And when I look and from my planning experience when I was in college, actually, that was one of the major things that was always you wanted to locate R3 adjacent to major thoroughfares that way, so that most of the traffic could go out that way and not bother the rest of the neighborhood. Plus, it makes it much more accessible that way.
Absolutely, and we will be doing a full traffic study, and if there's, you know, if something's different, we may have to redesign for the plat. Val, can you bring up the site plan? So this is our site plan, and these, this multifamily project we've done out in the Quad Cities, and they've been very, very, very successful. I think we have 350 units in 2 different apartment complexes. One, because they look like large houses. And they have their own private entrances. We found, you know, empty nesters moving into them, and millennials liking all the green space and parks. So we have walking paths throughout. You know, they really do look like, okay, do you have the elevations? They look like nice big houses.
How many phases?
Excuse me?
How many phases are you talking, or are you talking phasing this?
Well, we would, no, we would build and then slow down, lease up and then build and slow down. So we have about a 2-year build process.
Okay.
And it'll have a nice clubhouse and pool as well.
Can you go back one? Does it have to empty into Victory Road?
There has to be, for fire, there has to be 2 separate entrances.
So make it on the north on 35.
I would suspect that you probably aren't able to do that with the state regulations for access that way.
I don't believe that you can, you know, there actually is a stub there. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe that the fire code would allow it on both sides of the street.
Yeah, that's what I was getting
And I
at.
think the city wants a dedicated street through the middle to connect. I mean, it's a connection thing for them. But as you can see, most of the traffic flow, and we'll confirm this with a full traffic study, will be going to Channel.
What about the heavy utility lines above, where are they running?
Where do they go?
Yeah, where are they running on the property?
There's a power easement that runs down the center that we are building outside of the easement.
And there's so many feet that you have to build that around?
There's an easement, there's a 100-foot easement that we have to build around.
Trees, right?
I'm sorry?
Just like trees, right?
Big power lines.
Big power lines.
We aren't able to build in the easement, and we are not. There's also an easement that runs down channel, power easement. Actually, our requirements, because it's, we're financing through HUD, requires even to be outside of those easements, outside of any fall zones.
Josh, Councilman May kind of hit on one of the points, but can you talk about why this particular area was attractive in terms of multifamily as opposed to single family or otherwise for development?
Yep. One, because of it's a main thoroughfare through to the city. Two, we found that a lot of people are leaving the city, that are working in the city are leaving the city because there's not adequate housing. This is very visible to them when they're coming in. You know, we've looked at a lot of pieces of land in Norfolk, and, you know, we've gone through this process before, and quite frankly, wherever you pick, homeowners aren't going to be happy about it. But there's a study out there that shows that actually property ownership goes, the valuation goes up on those properties because when people move out of those apartments, they tend to live in the same area and buy houses within that area.
Any other questions for Josh? Okay, thank you.
What are they gonna do about storm drainage, water drainage off that?
There would be civil design.
Where does that go?
We'll have retention on site.
This is a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so.
Hi, Donna Hilkeman, 820 Werner Drive. Me and my husband live there. My husband is on Social Security. I'm planning on being there at the end of the year. I would just like to know how many of you guys have actually gone out there and looked at this land? You've been out there?
Yes.
All of you have gone out there?
No, I didn't.
Because to me, when I look at that, I don't see enough land. How you get all that in that land? With that power lines going through. But that's just something I hope that you've all thought about. And not only that, but the fact that you're really putting a hardship on my family. And we will have to move. I can't afford that. And so that'll have to come off of the price of my house. I just hope you all thought about that. And what you would think if it was your parents or you. Yes, that sounds really good. Looks pretty good. But then go walk through the mall and look what the mall looks like and how they let that deteriorate. Is that what's going to happen here? They're going to build this, they're going to do all this, and then they're gone. And then we're left with what's left. I just want you to all really think hard about that. And at least think about it for a while before you throw it in at us. Is this really what you want? Fine, but make sure we can do it. Make sure that power line is not a problem. And like they said, drainage, drive around after these rains and look where that water's setting. There's a lot of water setting around there from drainage. There's no place to go. So I just hope that you really did look at that land, look at our homes and say, would I want this here? Would I really want this? So, I thank you.
Thank you.
Been quite a few questions brought up that I thought of.
State your name again,
Oh,
sir.
Sean Langmeyer,
Thank you.
2 Channel Road. Have you spoken with MPPD?
Yes.
And what did they say about the power line?
There's an easement that's actually recorded.
Right. Did they also tell you that even though it's a walking path, it will probably have to raise those structures? The 2 structures, the 2 towers? At approximately 75,000 apiece, and possibly the 3rd one to the north?
They won't.
When I talked to the engineer in Columbus, he said there's a good possibility they will.
Steve and I have been in contact.
Okay. Another question, comes up about the sewer and the water. Power company is responsible to the meter at my house. Gas company is responsible to the meter at my house. Why am I responsible to your sewer all the way to the street? And water.
I certainly can't tell you the history of that. But that is a very standard model used across the country.
It's for
That's the
3
model.
small communities.
That's the model that's been in place here for.
So why do I have to pay to get a service to me and then pay for that service? Power company I don't, gas company I don't, home company, I just pay the phone bill. I don't pay them to come to my house. So, and he had said that he's read a study of how it increases property value. I've also read 5 studies that say it does not lower. So, you can read, you can find a study either way. Thank you.
I do want to know, a lot of these policies, I think these are natural questions that come up, and I'd be asking the same questions too. But I do want everybody to know that this stuff isn't being pulled out of thin air. This is, these are standard practices that when neighborhoods developed within cities, these were codes that were developed and have been in place for some time and are fairly standard in communities across the country. So it's, you know, sometimes these things are hard to comprehend as to how they got put into place, but we're not reinventing the wheel here. And in terms of financing these type of developments, you'll see going back through the history of the community, this is how it's been done. Is that a fair statement, Steve?
That is a fair statement.
So we'll continue with the public hearing. Anyone else wishing to express their thoughts on this can come forward.
My name's James White, and we had a dream a long time ago to look for a home that we could retire in. We looked a long, long time. We come across this neighborhood, and it's peaceful. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody says hi. Couldn't find a better neighborhood anywheres. And then all of a sudden, our dream is getting shattered. Getting blindsided. There's somebody else's greed. And it shouldn't be that way. We stood up, pledge allegiance to that flag. It says justice for all. So why don't you give the little guy some justice? Put yourselves in our shoes. We saved, we worked hard. A lot of us are retiring, just like they said. We had a dream. And don't shatter it on us. That was a nice neighborhood. We don't want riffraff, anything else coming in there. It's quiet. Cops hardly even come through there. They don't have to. Hardly ever seen out of 8 years, cop car coming through there. You guys all think about it. Because I feel like we're getting strong-armed. It's not right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Anyone else?
Bob Carbello, 1103 East Grove Avenue, living right across the street from where this is happening. There's about half of us that live out there are got corner properties. So when this utility comes through, we're getting assessed on both sides. We're getting assessed for one hookup on one side.
You're getting yeah, you would be assessed for one side, one hookup.
I'm Matt Werner. I live on 816 South Victor Road, and I'm against this water and sewer upgrade also, but I've looked at this for quite a while, and this Highline wire that's going through this pretty green area that's going through there, I mean, it's not, that Highline wire is not even on that picture, and I hope you guys have all looked at that, because people's kids are going to be playing in that greenery underneath the Highline wire. That is, it's the high voltage Highline wire. And I guess what I don't understand is we have never asked for this water or sewer. The Amberwood apartments are right out there on the other side of the 35. They have the city water and city sewer, and there's a field there. And I just don't understand why it's just not put there. I mean, we're not asking for this. You're not gonna hurt anybody to have the apartments on the other side of the highway. And I guess the other thing too is, as far as being part of Norfolk, Nebraska, I don't think that it looks good driving into town and all you see is apartments on both sides of your road. The other thing, I'm also looking at this plan here, $25,000 added cost to me. I'm a single parent with 2 kids, and I am going to have a hard time coming up with $25,000 for this, and I probably will end up selling my house too. But I'm also looking at this here, and I have a feeling there's gonna be a new road and a new sidewalk too, and I'm gonna end up having to pay for that too. And it's not been brought up at this meeting, but what I can see right here, going out on Victory Road, that road's not in very good shape. And I guess the other thing too is they keep on saying that this is gonna be a HUD apartment. I also heard that they're getting tax breaks for 15 years. Is this correct, Josh? You'll be getting tax breaks for this property for 15 years?
We've submitted for tax increment financing.
I just don't understand how a corporation gets extra help and the people that haven't asked for city water or city sewer. There's no history of anybody. And we don't get any type of a tax break, any help. I don't understand. A little disappointed.
Thank you, Matt. Can we address the further infrastructure concerns that he talked about? Any new streets that come in, who would be responsible for the cost of those?
So as a function of the development, the developer would put in the street concept there for his development. Like you mentioned, there would be an extension of East Grove. We would like to see that as a city street connected across over to Highway 35. So once that's constructed, the city would take over maintenance of that section of the road. Highway 35 in that area is currently city's for maintenance purposes. Victory Road, that is slowly becoming all city street now with the most recent annex. And again, that would be under city's responsibility going forward for any maintenance or reconstruction. And I would also, I know that several individuals have mentioned the $25,000 hardship, and just for clarity, you know, at least up front, the initial assessment would just be for approximately half of that. So the original assessment's about 12.5 is what our current estimate is. So it's not a 25,000 upfront.
If they did that over a 15-year period, it's $70 a month.
And we would allow them to do that, stretch it out.
Correct. You know, there are some, I think there's a couple options we can look at in terms of the length of the annexation. Is that correct, Randy?
Yes, there's various sections of statutes that these can be levied under, but I would think this would be somewhere between 10 and 20-year assessments.
So, you know, we could certainly look at the longer portion of that just to make it, make that cost a little bit less on a monthly basis. And again, the tax isn't paid monthly. I appreciate the calculation, but it is, or that assessment is paid annually. So.
And these numbers we've been discussing are based on a 15-year assumption. Is that correct? Yeah, not 20.
Well, the 25,000 is just, that's the today's cost.
But some
That was 15-year assessment.
15 rather than 20. Okay. Power line concerns have also been brought up. Can we talk, Josh, maybe you can speak a little bit more about that, your interaction with NPPD on that portion of it?
This site plan was designed by Olson Engineering, and they took every easement, every city code into play when they designed this. We've moved buildings, we've moved streets, we've moved outside of easements. We are compliance with all setbacks. This is not a final plat. This is a conceptual site plan that was designed to all codes and easements.
Yeah, and as Josh mentioned, both he and I have had conversations with NPPD with regard to the height, the power line through the site, and at least so far they've indicated they don't have any issues with what he's proposing.
We're still in public hearing. Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so.
Dan Gary is my name. I don't have much voice left, so I won't talk very long. You know, this situation concerning the water lines and the neighborhood not being on the water, it was not our intent as developers to have the neighbors subsidize this by paying for part of the water line or anything like that. It's just a situation that came up that when the water line goes in, the city would like them to connect, or the city code forces them to connect, basically, because they're in the city limit without their own water. So it was never our intent. I mean, there's tax increment financing and other advantages when you put in apartments, but one of the things that we didn't plan on or say, well, we can get them to pay this much. No, it is not our intent, and we still don't want the neighbors to subsidize this development by having to pay for water and sewer.
That topic has come up as well, tax increment financing and its potential usage for this project. Steve or Andy or Val, can you address how that might work and how, if that was something that happened, how that might help pay for part of the infrastructure cost for this project?
The incremental taxes will be used to pay debt service on a bond, and that bond then will go to pay for some of the infrastructure costs to put in this development.
So using that tool potentially mitigates the cost, the cost of the infrastructure and what otherwise might have to be placed on assessment, if it were not used, I guess is my question.
My understanding is the developers getting all the tax increment financing is what you're proposing, Josh?
They were proposing what?
That you would get the tax increment financing, that it would not go to offset special assessments.
No, it would be going into infrastructure.
Yeah, your cost, infrastructure cost.
So that's my question, yeah. Does using TIF help pay for the infrastructure that you're responsible for, thereby mitigating the other costs?
The amount of TIF we're asking for doesn't even touch the amount of infrastructure that's needed for the project.
Okay. All right, we're still in public hearing. Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so.
Sean Lamar again. I do have, I guess, another question. Why Park County? Why not leave it R1? The way it sounds, the sewer and water thing is going. There's nothing we can do about it, even though we own the land, it belongs to the city. Why an apartment complex? Why not single-family dwellings as the area is nearly surrounded by? Put the apartment complex across the road with the other apartment complex. If that pumping station or lift station is already set up to handle that much, why hasn't Amberwood expanded if there's such a demand for housing? The apartment that burned down on Benjamin Avenue, is that going back in? Do we know?
Depends on if that developer wants to do that or not.
Well, if there's such a demand for housing and it was working so well
You
for
would
him.
think he would, but we can't decide that.
Okay, so brings you back to my original question. Why not keep this area R1, small acreages as they are around it, and put the apartments across the road? I believe Dan owns the property across the road the way it is. So, just food for thought.
Thanks, Sean. I will remind everyone that this process didn't start tonight. There's been a couple planning commission meetings at which this issue was addressed. Val, can you maybe summarize some of the discussion at those meetings and then ultimately how the planning commission made its recommendation on this particular zoning change request?
Yes, at Planning Commission, similar discussion points were brought up there too, and Planning Commission tabled it so that we could get some answers for them, and Steve Ramus came back at the second Planning Commission with similar answers to what was discussed tonight as far as utilities and connection districts and that sort of thing. It was also discussed, the second meeting was, what we're talking about a lot tonight is platting. And so we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, I think. This is a zone change. And so the Planning Commission talked amongst themselves and said, the question before us today is zoning. And is R3 zoning appropriate at this place? Is this where we want R3 zoning to be for the city? And so that's where they took the discussion, and that's what they made the decision on. And they made I believe it was a 7-0 vote in favor of R3 zoning from R1.
So again, the issue before us tonight is the zone change request. So Val, as we move forward, should the request be approved, there's still a platting process, right? The plan, as it develops into specifics, would come back before the council for our approval, correct?
Correct. You would have a preliminary plat that would go before Planning Commission, And then if that gets approved, then you would have a final plat before Planning Commission and a final plat before City Council also.
So there's 2 more layers of public process regarding the plat, both the Planning Commission and the City Council again.
Yes.
We're still in public hearing. Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so. Evening.
My name is Leslie Gomez, and I live at 704 Channel Road. I currently don't reside there. My parents do, because I moved away to Lincoln to go for college and, you know, start my own life. But all I keep hearing is just people's concerns as to why this is starting to become an issue. And I haven't heard anything about this. Today is my first time hearing about this water line or whatever having to go through our neighborhood, and this whole development thing is all brand new to me. I had no idea about it, and my household is an English primarily speaking household because I have siblings who still live there, and my parents, they mainly speak Spanish, but they also understand, so I just want to make that stated. But they have a lot of questions about it. They haven't had any real answers. When you guys try to reach out to talk to them, they're at work too, so they can't answer phone calls. They're not there to open the door and have a conversation with anybody about it. So I just think, being a person who used to live there, and I love our neighborhood a lot. We've lived there since 2002. I was raised there, my little sister's raised there. All of us love that area. We don't know all of our neighbors, but we know a good amount of our neighbors, and I think that's the main reason why my parents decided to move in that area specifically, was because you get to know who's all there. And adding on this, whatever it is, there's gonna be a lot of people, new people, and they have grandchildren, they have kids that will play in their backyards and stuff like that. And I think it's comforting knowing that we know who's all outside. We know who would be out playing in the yard. We know who would be gardening. We know who comes home at what time, not to pry or anything into anybody's lives, but because that's what we know. So I don't have any questions specifically. I'm just trying to make some statements and comments. So for us, like for our family, I think it would just be better if we could get more answers and be more involved in the process of what's going on, instead of it being a set plan and then it getting thrown into our faces as to what's going on. So maybe just let us be more in the loop about it. And like I said, I moved away to Lincoln because I wanted to start my own life, but I have thoughts all the time. I'm 23 years old that Norfolk was such a great place to grow up because of my neighborhood, because I knew who was outside when I was outside. There isn't a lot of traffic in that Victory Road street or whatever. So that's another great thing. And yeah, the highway's there, we all know that, but we don't want to add more cars to add more, you know, emergencies or whatever. And like they said, they've never really seen a police officer drive through those roads, and that's for a reason, because everybody keeps to their own. They don't want to get involved with anybody else. That's why they live out there. And like I said, I moved away in Lincoln. There's a lot of people that are from Norfolk that go to school at UNL in Southeast. And I always hear them saying how they used to love how Norfolk was before all the new people started coming, because there's obviously crime, there's drugs, that's nothing that's new within the last few years. There's a lot of people that are doing things that they shouldn't, and I think it's because we're just developing more land and bringing in new people, when everybody who's here is here for a reason. They love living here, and it's because it's so quiet. So I just wanted to voice for my family, and for me specifically too, having lived there for a good amount of my life. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question for the
Remind us of your name again,
I'm
please.
Cindy.
Yeah.
I have a question about the lift stations. You know, maybe I'm getting this wrong, but a lift station means it lifts it up and it moves it north?
In this case.
To a point and gravity feed or flow to.
Okay. Well, flood control goes from north to south, and you're taking stuff from our end, lifting it up and moving it to the north. How many times has that lift station broke down and flooded basements?
Dennis, how many lift stations, I'm gonna reach out to support here. Dennis, how many lift stations do we have in the community? 13 lift stations.
And how many of them failed?
The only one we've had problems with was this, what we call the 275, this one here, got overloaded at times. We did a lot of
Right
work.
on Amberwood.
What's that?
That's right by Amberwood.
Correct.
Yes,
Right.
and that's where you wanna back off or stuff?
Anyway, to go on though, so we did have issues with that one approximately, starting about 2008, we did a lot of work with that in that area. And about 2000, we haven't had any backups there since I believe it's 2011 or 2012. And we have done a lot of work with there, and we do not foresee any issues with that lift station. It is, as Steve said earlier, it does have the adequate capacity now. So we.
Because in the past, it has failed twice, I know that, and it has flooded sewage into somebody's basement. And I wouldn't want that in my basement. And if you're putting apartments there and it's not adequate, you know, to me, it should be going south and not pumped up to go north. That's just my theory, you know, I'm logical, I think everything should flow the way the river flows, you know, and you're pumping it up to go the other way and it's gonna overload the system. That's my thought.
You know, it should be brought up that we had some conversations and some work with Woodland Park a few years ago, and I think what we were receiving from them, and Dennis and Todd can probably explain that better than I can, not being an engineer, but I think when we looked at the excess flow that we were getting from them that we weren't supposed to be getting, it really is what caused those particular backups. If there were any others, I'm certainly not aware of them, but I don't know if you guys want to talk about that or not.
Rob, you're exactly correct. That is correct. And there's been a lot of work that has been done, and there's a Woodland Park actually in a detention pond that shaves off any flows during rain events, things like that. So you're exactly correct. And there was a study done in 2014 that confirmed that what was done between the city and Woodland Park was a fix. So we not. The reason it goes north, continues to remain, is because that's the current sewer lines on this are. As Steve said, if that becomes need to be capacity in the future, then it would run south, kind of what you're saying. But as of today, the sewer lines, existing lines are on the north side.
Well, that's what I'm worried about, is that you add this to what we have.
We don't wait for a sewer system to reach capacity before we start to design and implement, enough size or whatever we need to do in those systems. That, it doesn't work like that. We're looking at that when we're about 50–60% and starting to do planning and get funding in place so that we can upgrade those. We're in the 70–80% capacity. So again, even as a function of the rains we've had during this month, we didn't see any sign that area that we were.
Well, that's what I just can't figure out on this plot, is that all the water and sewer is on the other side of 35, or 275, 35, whatever you want to call that road there. And to come down to there, it would be logical just come down the road and hook into there instead of coming down our neighborhood and making us all financially burdened with this cost. Because the water and sewer is right there by Amberwood.
I can assure you that as we enter the engineering phase, our goal is to design the least cost alternative that fits for that neighborhood and our system in that area.
But like somebody says, if it was your parents, you're putting a financial burden on all of us. Totally. And we're a tight-knit community. We've cherished our lives out there. I've raised my kids. I've done the city thing where, they annexed us into the city, but we had a schoolhouse right across the road. We couldn't go to school over there because it was outside city limits. I had to get permission for my kids to walk to school because it was a borderline. It's just, and the road is not equipped for traffic going north since they redesigned that road.
Mentioned the city is requiring him to do a traffic study, and that'll tell us where the traffic's gonna go, but, within reason. They're fairly accurate. When we get the study back, we'll look at traffic needs, turn lane needs, in that area. And if it comes back and says there's an issue with pavement, in that area, we'll address that.
I know we have streetlights that are not where they should be, and there's dark spots where they should be, and there's been a lot of conflict with the streets when they redesigned that road. So hopefully the city takes into consideration that, we've been out there a long time, and we like our neighborhood the way it is.
Okay, thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Anyone else before we close the public hearing?
I am Randy Hill, 700 Channel Road. I guess what I would ask the board, I think as has been brought up before, there's 100% of us are very concerned with what's going on out there. I would ask the council here to at least table this until we can have a meeting. I think the property owners deserve a meeting with the city some evening when everybody can be there. I think we definitely need to meet and see, we need to discuss some of these things. One of the things that hasn't been brought up yet, which is a problem in Eastern Heights, is that there was some water improvements done out there, and some of the landowners out there are telling me their water bill is just astronomical out there. We haven't brought up what's it costing us as far as that goes. None of us have, we haven't talked about elevations. Is it possible? Septic tank, I don't have any utilities in the basement because of septic tank, things like that. We'd like to know about utilities, stuff like that. So I guess what I would recommend, this is the first reading of this, is please table this. I would ask the city to set up a meeting with all 25 of us or whatever there is at a time when we can all meet and discuss this and go over this. I mean, these gentlemen are brought up, they're willing to pay for some of this. I think that would be a great idea. Even digging from our property out to hook on is still going to be probably $4,000 or $5,000 per household, probably more than that from others. So I would ask, like I said, table this, let the city, let's set up a meeting with everybody, because maybe I'm the only one here that's a little bit unclear because I'm not home during the day. I travel with my business, things like that. And make sure that everybody's aware of this particular meeting. So that's one thing I'd ask, if you would consider tabling this till we can have a meeting, the property owners can have a meeting with city, the engineering, we can see what's going on, we can see, what their plans are, design, things like that. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Okay. Anyone else? Still in public hearing? Seeing none. Oh.
Shirley Kelverlau. Nah, we're on 1103 East Grove Avenue. We live right on the corner of East Grove and South Victory. All that traffic's gonna come out of there and pour onto our street. How difficult is that for us to get in and out? And when they go north, that's not gonna be an easy access to go around all those corners and past the church to go out onto 35. They're gonna be pouring onto 35. We already have a difficult problem trying to get onto 35 to go north to the roundabout, because we got all the traffic from the south coming up and the traffic from the north coming down, and then you're going to dump the other part of the traffic out onto 35, which that's going to be more traffic going north. We'll never get off of South Victory onto 35 with all, 160 apartments. That's approximately about 300 vehicles in the morning and evening time. Congestion, accidents, ridiculousness. Why doesn't this stay residential, single-family dwellings? Makes more sense that the roads and everything can handle this excess. Has there been any thought to that? You got all Nucor traffic coming down, all the semis coming from Nucor, Norfolk Iron and Metal, they come down 35. So people are not going to use the 35 access. They're all going to come North Victory. or South Victory to go north or to go south? Has there been a thought put into that process of what kind of congestion this is gonna cause? Some mornings I can sit 4 or 5 minutes to get onto 35 to go north. I think power lines are gonna be a difficult situation. I don't see how they're gonna run through that. And you wanna tell me my property is gonna be worth more on that corner with apartments across the street from me? All the drainage is gonna run right into our basements that are on 35 for sure, or along Victory Road. You want water in your basement? I don't. I have property for sale right now if you wanna buy it, if you think it's gonna be a great place to live. Anybody want to buy it? It's a nightmare for us, and nobody's happy. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Shirley. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, I will move to close the public hearing and ask for a planning commission report.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on June 5th, 2018 at the request of Daniel and Connie Geary to consider a zoning change from R1 single-family residential to R3 multiple-family residential on property generally located 1/4 mile north of the intersection of South Victory Road and East Omaha Avenue. The item was tabled in order to obtain further information and removed from the table for action at the June 19th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the request on a 7-0 vote.
Okay. That concludes the public hearing. We will now move to item number 21. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5555, approving a zoning change from R1 to R3 on property generally located 1/4 mile north of the intersection of South Victory Road and East Omaha Avenue.
I'd offer a motion to consider ordinance number 5555.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, council, any questions or comments or discussion just among the council? I guess I would note a couple things as we move into discussion that we do remember this is just the zoning change request before us tonight. Even if this were to move forward, there would still be, as Val mentioned, at least 2 more rounds of public input into the process, both with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So this by no means is nearing the end of this journey, so to speak, on decision making as to this particular development proposal. Secondly, I guess it stuck in my mind during this discussion that since this area has been in city limits for so long, without these city services having been extended, we could be having this discussion should there be no development before us. Again, a discussion that should have happened back at the time when this part of the city was brought into the city boundaries. That's the appropriate planning process. Annexation occurs and city services are extended by requirement of our code. So I just wanted to say that because those things were stuck out to me, were notable during the discussion that we had tonight.
Your Honor, I guess I need to concur with those statements that you noted as one that this is a zoning hearing. It's not a question as to what utilities and what the layout is or where the utility lines are. It's a zoning question. And the other travesty that's out there is, yeah, this was brought in 30 years ago, long before, you haven't been on 30, have you? Long before any of us were on the council, and to say that it isn't fair now, it wasn't fair then. Utilities should have been expanded at that time to those residences that way, and it would have been, you know, I don't know where the 40,000 came from, but again, this isn't a question on utilities This is a question on zoning. And if you go to community planning and development, that's what is used as a buffer between a major thoroughfare and other residential areas, is multifamily. So I don't know that we are reinventing the wheel here or anything. That's just good planning.
Any other discussion, council? Okay, no further comments.
Val, I was going to ask, yeah, it is a zoning question. Moving ahead with this, between zoning and platting, what's the timeline there? How much time is there for discussion and traffic studies and all that kind of thing?
That's kind of a hard question to answer. It depends on how quickly the developer and their engineer moves. I doubt that Steve would allow it to get to final platting stage without the traffic study. He's already said that that's one of the requirements that they need for that. And we would not put through a final plat without the zoning being correct also. A preliminary plat can go through planning commission without the zoning being finalized, because that does not actually change the layout of the lot. Only final platting does that. So it really depends on how quickly the developer and their engineer and all their consultants move forward with this.
Safe to say it's months.
I'd say at least a month or two, yeah.
Okay. And certainly it is a zoning change.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I'll talk a little bit more. The public process continues as we discussed, but again, as the platting goes through Planning Commission, City Council, there would be notification made of neighbors on that process, and as to the Planning Commission, the first Planning Commission hearing of this.
That is not standard practice because plats are not public hearings.
Okay.
They, like all the other citizens, are certainly welcome to stay updated. I mean, we post and publish our agendas prior to there, so they're more than willing to, happy to come at that time. But no, they would not get a letter saying this is a public hearing. It would not be in the newspaper like the zone change is tonight.
Any other questions or comments, Council? If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
Voting in favor of ordinance 5555, council members Rehnquist, Lange, Merrill, Murin, Jackson, Faust, File. Voting against the ordinance on first reading, council member Dahlketter. Ordinance 5555 carries on first reading.
Okay, that moves us to item number 22. I'm sorry, item 23 on the regular agenda. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5554, annexing a tract of land generally located at the southwest quadrant of Highway 275 and 25th Street. As a note, ordinance number 5554 passed on first reading at the June 18th City Council meeting.
Your Honor, I move consideration of ordinance 5554 on second reading.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Steve, could you give us, remind us on the background of this, please?
Mr. Mayor, council members, this is the annexation of properties for the Midwest Bank project. It would be on the west side of 25th Street, south of 275. There are 3 separate parcels there that would be annexed, 2 of them related to the lot, and a 3rd parcel to the south that is related to public right-of-way. Any questions? I'll be glad to answer those.
Thank you, Steve, any questions or comments? Any discussion on this, council? Seeing none, please vote. No. Second reading? Short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to annex to said city a tract of land located in part of the northeast quarter of Section 29, Township 24 North, Range 1, west of the 6 p.m. Madison County, Nebraska.
Okay, now please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5554 carries on second reading only.
Brings us to item number 24. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5556 to amend section 24-164 to extend the no parking area on the north side of Georgia from 170 feet east of the center line of North 7th Street west to the center line of North 8th Street.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5556.
Second. Okay. Can someone please give us background on this, please? Number 24. Extending no parking
I'll be
area.
happy there,
outside of
Mr.
Georgia.
Mayor.
Yeah.
Council members, this is where a developer has created a funeral chapel in the area adjacent, and they've doubled approximately doubled the amount of parking that they have on site. And as a function of the funeral processions and so forth that would be occurring in that area, they've asked that we eliminate the parking on the north side. I would be in support of that as a function of the additional on-site parking that they have created over there.
Okay, seems fairly straightforward. Any questions, comments, discussion, council? If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska to amend section 24-164 of the official city code to extend the no parking area on the north side of Georgia Avenue from 170 feet east of the center line of North 7th Street, west to the center line of North 8th Street, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5556 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5556 on second and third.
Second. Okay, motion second to suspend the rules. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5556 carries on second and third.
Okay. That concludes this meeting of the Norfolk City Council. Have a good evening.